don't even know how to read or write. This is just not the movement for you. Communists, liberals, leftists, that's down the hall to the left. If you're some kind of America hater from some third world country, if you're from Europe, you hate American power, you're threatened by American power, this is not the movement for you. This is a movement for U.S. citizens. This is a movement for Americans. It's a movement for right-wing Americans that want America to have primacy over the entire planet, as much power, as much abundance, as many resources as possible. So if you're coming around with this nonsense about, they stole the oil, that's not moral. They intervened in another country, you violated their sovereignty. I don't give a shit. I don't care at all. We do it all the time, and we've done it for centuries. It's called Manifest Destiny.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Based Network. I'm your host, Israel Populum. Today we have a pretty interesting story tonight. As you guys know, Nick Fuentes was on vacation during this whole Venezuela thing, so he had a pretty late reaction, and people were very excited to see what the new leader of the American First Movement was going to say. This anti-neocon buster, power level so strong. Oh, wait, he shilled over to American imperialism. Oh, I mean, this really shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, Nick Fuentes is on his generational run. I mean, if you look here, 62,000 viewers on Rumble when he came out. So Nick Fuentes is totally on his generational run. A lot of people are waiting to see what this guy had to say, and many people are disappointed. Others are very happy. And we're going to get into it. He kind of postured himself as this person who was against regime change. He was against neocons. He was against these forever wars. And these kind of wars aren't benefiting America. But he has a very different perspective. Now, the difference between Nick Fuentes and someone like a Ben Shapiro is looking at it from the benefit of Israel. Nick Fuentes is trying to look at it from the betterment of the United States. Now, we may disagree, and I disagree very heavily, and I think that he's being very hypocritical in his opinions. And this might be a, super edgy take. I don't think Nick Fuentes is a good guy or his motivations are pure. I think he has a very particular message and a very particular thing he wants to execute into the country. He's an identitarian. He thinks of himself as white before American and also before Christian. I'm going to prove that here, especially because he's like, this Christ first guy. And I don't really think that's the case. I think he puts his race before his religion. And, he'll probably tell you that's not the case, but I think it definitely is the case. And we're going to get into the videos here. I know you're not here for me. You're here for Nick, so let's watch.
I believe that your reaction to this operation in Venezuela kind of tells you what side you're on from the point of view of identity. One of my favorite heuristics or axioms that I like to say on this show is that we have to learn to take our own side. What does that mean? Who are you? Where were you born? Where were your parents born? What color is your skin? What religion are you? Me? The color of my skin is white. I was born in America. My parents were born in America. 3 out of 4 of my grandparents, their ancestors came from Europe. European domination of the globe is good for me as a Christian, American, mostly European person. Why would I want to vilify my own people? Why would I vilify my ancestors? Why would I look at them not as villains, as the villains of history? Why would I celebrate that our power as Europeans, as Americans, as Christians is diminishing relative to other people, relative to people who are born in other countries that are not Christian, that have a different complexion, that have a different clan? Why would I celebrate that? Look at the people that carried out the Delta Force operation in Venezuela. They're all white, okay? And so there are a lot of these types out there, ideological liberals, socialists, Islamists, and they love to see Western countries, European countries, America, they love to see these countries lose. And they put flags of foreign brown countries in their bio, Burkina Faso, Palestine, Iran, Venezuela. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want America to make an empire for Israel in the Middle East. I want America to make an empire in the world for us, for me, for my posterity, in the tradition of my ancestors. And when I see that kind of exercise of power by the United States, I'm proud that the country that I pay taxes to, the country with the passport that I have, is able to do these things. It makes me feel proud. It makes me feel safe. It makes me feel good. And I'm glad. And there's a lot of people out there that are seething because they literally just hate to see America have power. And it's not all of them, but it's a lot of them. It's not every single person that didn't like it, but it's a lot of people that didn't like it. They have a reflexive, anti-American, anti-European view because they have an ideological hang-up. They want to see white Christian countries, ostensibly, historically, nominally, they want to see those countries diminished, and they sort of get off on it. I saw people saying they wanted for Venezuela's S-300 and S-400 Russian air defense systems to shoot down American jets. Like, they were giddy about this, gleeful. They said, America's not ready. When we go in, they're going to encounter Venezuelan resistance. They're going to get fed into a meat grinder, guerrilla warfare from who? From socialist brown thugs, and you want that to happen? Why? Because Trump didn't ask Ilhan Omar for permission? Because he didn't go to the United Nations and beg Burundi and the Central African Republic? And I think there's something borderline treasonous about that. I think it's anti-American.
So yeah, you hear it there. You know, he starts off with, again, his perspective on identity, and that's something that's very important to Nick Fuentes. He is a white nationalist. He believes that white people should have a majority in the country. A lot of people also believe that as well, but that is something that's integral to Nick Fuentes. It's like race is something super integral to Nick Fuentes. Now, when he talks about, you know, some crazy liberals who want to see America fall, they don't like seeing European dominance, they don't like seeing American dominance, that's true. You know, some people don't have that. But I think he mischaracterizes a majority of the people who are against this. You know, there's always going to be crazy liberals who are, you know, just against anything that America does, any kind of a play for American dominance. And I know and I understand the strategic necessity for these types of materials. I understand the strategic necessity for Greenland. I understand the strategic necessity for Venezuela. The question is does this actually make America stronger? Now, in the short term, maybe. But in the long term, I really don't think so. I think America is losing its grip on power. I think with the AI Cold War and China and Russia gaining more dominance, we're entering a multipolar world. America continuously doing plays like this, strong-arming anyone who gets in their way, will eventually make America a target for a new coalition of countries that are not a part of American dominance. They don't want America to be dominant. And when we enter that multipolar world, will America be able to do it alone? Possibly, possibly not. Another thing I wanted to touch on was, again, that Nick Fuentes doesn't hold Christ first. He says that, but he doesn't actually really believe it. No, whoa, calm down before you go in the comments. And he says, well, he talks about Christ all the time. Yeah, maybe. But when you have a perspective that might makes right, that just because America is the strongest country as of now, that they're able to do whatever they want, go to whatever country, destabilize, like the Ann Coulter take, where it's like, we can take it, it's in our hemisphere. It's like that's the same argument for Israel. And he kind of let the game out there a little bit, where he's talking about, I don't want to create an Israeli empire in their region. I want to create an American empire in mine. That's something that he also said when he was in the Piers Morgan interview, where he said, Israel has my politics.
They have my politics. In Israel, they want to maintain a Jewish majority. If they had it their way, it would only be Jewish people. They're fighting like hell so that Jewish people can have as much territory, a Jewish state. They can be proudly Jewish in their own land. Whereas in America, we are being besieged by 10 million illegal immigrants in 4 years. And then whites and Christians are going to be the minority.
First of all, it's a little ridiculous to hear a guy who admits that his family is Italian and Mexican start talking about heritage American. Like, seriously?
Because Nick Fuentes wants Israeli politics in America for white people, because he's a white identitarian. And he holds that above being Christian. And the reason I say that is because whenever you have these types of perspectives that might makes right, we can do whatever we want because we're the strongest, that's anti-Christian. I'm sorry to tell you that. If you don't think so, you should read your Bible. Now, it doesn't mean that America should be this toothless tiger that does nothing for their strategic influence. But we need to start looking and having a more Christ-like focus on how we deal with foreign policy. And I think the exact opposite of that is what we've been doing. And Nick Fuentes is a very great orator, and he articulates that very well when it gets to Iran, right? When he wants to do it for Iran, when America wants to do it for Iran, right, and build a strong, dominant presence in the Middle East, he's against that because Israel benefits. And America is strong enough to bomb the crap out of any country that wants to talk crap and complain about us being in the Middle East. And based off of the argument that he just gave there, he should have no problem with that because America is gaining strategic dominance in the region. But, like he would probably, rebuttal with this, it's not actually in America's interest because America actually just gains a lot of enemies. And maybe they gain some strategic control of the region, but over time, in the world stage, when we're supporting the genocide in Gaza, we look evil. And it damages America. Maybe not in the short term, but in the long term. And he'll say that about Iran. He'll say that about intervening and basically shilling out for Israel. But when it comes to Venezuela, he doesn't. Why? Because it only benefits America. And he sees as a short-term benefit of getting these resources. So I think it's a little bit hypocritical coming from Nick. Now, of course, people instantly come out and they're trying to say that he's, a secret Zionist, right? He's a secret Jewish person. Nick Fuentes is a confirmed Jew. He's running cover for Zionist regime change. Fuentes is a Jewish surname. It's like, is this true? I don't think this is true. It's a Mexican surname. Whatever, right? And this is like the problem here. When you use your race as an identity, it will be weaponized against you. And I think this happens so much with Nick because, again, he is a white supremacist, right? He wants white people in America to be supreme, and he wants to set up a regime in America that benefits white people in the same way in Israel it benefits Jewish people. He said that verbatim. He said that multiple times. That's his ideology. That's what he wants. So if you don't want a ethno-nationalist regime in America, then you shouldn't be supporting Nick Fuentes. And again, support doesn't mean you can't watch the guy. You know, the guy is smart. The guy knows a lot about what's going on in the Middle East. He's a pretty good weapon against neocons, but he continues to push the neocon agenda when it comes to only benefiting America. But he doesn't see in the future that it can actually damage America. What happens when the petrodollar is weak? What happens when all these countries start coalescing against America? Do we just bomb the crap out of them? Is that how we do it? We strong arm them into submission? Or can we use diplomacy? The problem is this exact ideology where you can just go in and install a puppet government, take over. This has made America look like the bad guy. We were like a cartoonish Disney villain. And eventually, well, now I think we're getting to that point, you know, because we're in the AI Cold War. And then when one country wins, or we enter a multipolar world, we can't do that anymore. And now the optics are looking against us. And we can't just, strong arm everyone into submission like we used to do before. We're entering a new age. America's entering a new age. And this neocon politics that Nick Fuentes is defending here, because it happens to be in our southern hemisphere, and because someone wrote the Monroe Doctrine, someone wrote on a piece of paper that we must have complete, utter control over this hemisphere, we're going to end up doing that. But then does that actually help America in the long term? Does that help our perception across other nations? I don't think so. Let's continue here.
And we have to lay down the law that this is a right-wing movement. It is an Israel-critical movement. We seek to counter Jewish power and the Jewish oligarchy, but it is a right-wing realist movement. It is a pro-America movement. It is a movement that is not naive about the nature of the world and the nature of other countries. And if you think this is a place where we're going to come around and tell America to get to the back of the line and submit their concerns to the United Nations, and we're going to go and cape and die for the sovereignty of third world countries filled with illiterate peasants that don't even know how to read or write, this is just not the movement for you.
This is a false dichotomy. You could be against both of it. You could be against America doing needless regime change wars for foreign countries that don't necessarily benefit America. And you could be against these regime change wars even if they do benefit America in a very short-term lens. Because I think that we're getting away from the neocon politics. We're getting away from this strategy where we can go in and strong-arm everybody who disagrees with us. And I think that is why I truly think that Nick Fuentes puts his race first, his country second, and he puts his religion third. He puts Christ lower because his politics doesn't reflect that. It's fundamentally anti-Christ to have a might makes right worldview. And that's what Nick Fuentes has. Now, maybe you could say effectively that's how the world works because the world has fallen. But when has that ever been an excuse for a Christian to sin? Now, I'm not normally the guy who's like, oh, well, you're not actually reflecting Jesus Christ, or you're not actually doing this. And I end up being that guy today because, again, Nick Fuentes is someone who puts Christ very center in his ideology. But this is completely antithetical to that. Because then it's like, okay, so is Israel right in genociding the Gazans? Is Israel right in taking their land? And if you say no, would you say no if it was white Europeans doing that? I don't think so. I truly don't think so with Nick Fuentes. Now, again, this could be a very, because Nick Fuentes has a lot of supporters, especially on like Instagram and X. He has like a horde of his supporters who go out there and they're just very aggressive and they're like, oh. But I think a lot of his supporters are very against this. And that's why, they go out and they do attacks on Nick and calling him Jewish and calling him a secret Mossad agent and all this stuff, which is kind of reflecting of what Nick Fuentes preached to his audience. You made your bed, now you lie in it. And this is the biggest problem with Nick. I think this is the biggest problem with Nick because people truly think it's like, oh, this guy is just he's just critical of Israel and whatever. But it's like, no, his politics are very, very similar to the Israeli state. He wants white people to be the majority of the country, and not necessarily just that. He wants them to have superiority over other races. Now he won't go and be like, oh, but by the he's not going to go by the law, but he thinks that white people should be holding institutional power, just like the Israelis do in Israel. He wants Israel's politics in America for white people, and he said it multiple times in multiple different interviews. It's just a fact. So if you're against that morally, right, then you can't support Nick Fuentes. And again, that doesn't mean you can't watch him. It doesn't mean that you have to go on a whole spree denouncing him every time his name gets brought up in a conversation, because that's all performative. That's jester maxing. But this is kind of this should be an eye-opening moment for a lot of people who are just kind of huffing the paint with Nick Fuentes. This should be an eye-opening moment. Is that he is not against neocons by principle. He is a neocon. But he thinks that we shouldn't be doing it for Israel because he hates Israel, which is like fair-based. But if you look at it, it's like when he's against these kind of regime change wars, he's only against it when it benefits Israel. But if it benefits America, again, in the short term, because again, in the long term, it doesn't benefit America, it negatively impacts America in our view from other countries, he's all for it. Now, I don't think this is necessarily inherently hypocritical, but it's something to think about. And I think if you're listening to this and you're ready to go in the comments and freak out and whatever, it's like, just take a chill pill and listen to what I'm saying. Truly listen to what I'm saying. Because I think it's hard to, break the barrier for a lot of people who are very supportive of Nick. Because, again, he's a very charismatic guy. He's funny. He's very smart. He talks about Israel in a very critical way. And he's very analytical. And he knows the names. He knows the places. He knows all that stuff. And he's very good at saying it. But principles are principles. And I'm principally against regime change. And I'm principally against American imperialism. And I don't mean that in the same way that libtards mean it, where America does anything, it's imperialism. I mean that in a way of strong-arming other countries to do exactly what we want. If not, we regime change war them and put in a puppet government. Because it's like, has that helped America? And the only reason it hasn't blown up in our faces yet is because we're still the global dominant superpower. But when that is over, and when we enter this multipolar world, this is going to be disastrous for our country. And that's about it for today. That's all I really wanted to talk about. And I want you to chew on what I'm saying and understand what I'm saying and not just go trigger mode and go in the comments and freak out. I want you to listen to what I'm saying. If you like what I said, drop a comment, like, subscribe. If you didn't like what I said, do the same thing for engagement. Drop a hate comment down below. Drop a love comment down below. I don't care. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.